Hello, guys, and welcome to 21metrics podcast. I'm here today with Quant, Juhani Savonen, as usual, and we are about to analyze Bitcoin markets, macro, and basically everything in between. But first, don't forget to check our partner sideshift.ai. I will add the link to our show notes. But yeah, let's look at Bitcoin. So we're still
Yeah, let's
above
start. Yeah.
100k, yeah, and we are now seeing like buying pressure weakening currently. Like how do you see it, Juhani? Do you have any idea where we might?
I think it's in general like all the stock markets and risk assets is kind of like been really like hard to tell which direction we are going. So it's kind of like a little bit feels like the summer feeling that you normally get in last previous years.
Yeah,
That we basically saw around plus minus 10,000 euros weekly, and that's kind of like it has been in last 2 weeks. I think so. Like
yeah,
also like since we had like the last talk actually, because then I was like thinking that it probably corrects a bit, like it did, but now it's again like going up a bit. So it's
yeah,
kind of feels like a bit like summer, I think.
yeah,
That's kind of like seasonality for summer, I guess. That's kind of like
yeah.
how we could define it.
Yeah, as we discussed last time, I think seasonality is a strong thing in Bitcoin, and yeah, I think we're about to see it hit the market now. So now we have the summer season, of course. So do you think we are going to be seeing a calmer summer season, maybe, or how would you say?
Yeah, I think it's like June and July are kind of like calm periods. Also, like beginning of August. I think normally things start to happen in August. Like when the August starts, then normally you see like large stock market corrections in the end of August or something like that. But June and July is normally like calmer periods. Of course, it depends like what happens in the White House and the news flow, right?
Yeah,
It's kind of like the main driver, but currently like the liquidity is improving still, so it's kind of like supports a little bit higher valuations. So
yeah,
it's kind of like slightly trending up, I guess. But I think there's also like risk of downside if we start to get more negative news and if the liquidity starts to slow down. It just depends like what Fed does, right?
yeah. Agreed. Yeah. So when looking at a funding rate, we currently have like a positive funding rate still. So we had like a negative during the spring, but so at least like we don't have that many shorts currently, and like the amount of shorting is pretty moderate still. And if you look at realized price, it's at 46.7k. So when looking at like long-term investors, most of them are in profit currently. So that looks pretty good. So that's like the realized price is the average price of all Bitcoin purchases. So that's the um, indicator, and like Coinbase premium indicator shows that US is buying. So we are seeing like buying pressure from United States currently, which is not surprising. I would say so. Yeah, US based market uh, right here, and
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah,
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 yeah, like usual, I would say like Bitcoin is banned in China, and like Europe is usually not that eager to buy. So Europe's appetite is not that high usually. So it's about the US. I think it's a US.
yeah. Yeah, that also like explains why the dollar liquidity is the main driver. I think
Yeah,
like the Europe matters less in that
yeah, that's
sense.
a good point, and that it's related to USD liquidity, as you said. That it's like when liquidity increases, part of it flows to Bitcoin and digital assets and higher beta, and we are still above power law, well above it. So that's the yellow line there, and I think like when looking at the double top structure of 21, I think we could still go well above the power law fit. So if you look at the left part of the chart, you can see like the double top of year 21. Then the like hit well below the parallel fit. So I think there is like at least space for Bitcoin to move upwards in that sense. But yeah, altcoins. So it's like market is about Bitcoin dominance. So altcoins are really not taking off yet. Actually, like altcoin dominance excluding stable coins is at 28.4%. So that's very low. So it's very like Bitcoin driven market.
Yeah, it feels like that. I think so.
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask you, Juhani, that do you think that like the cycle structure might be shifting that before we had this alt season like in 2017 and 22 2020.
Yeah, 22 as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you think it could now be changing, or how do you see it could be seen?
I think the market is more mature these days than it was like, let's say, 2-3 years ago, because we already have a lot of like equities that invest in this space, and then there's more knowledge wherein the value in the digital asset space can be. So I think
Yeah.
it's more like focused on those larger ecosystem coins like Solana, Bitcoin, I think so,
Yeah.
and perhaps Ethereum a bit, but not so much. I think like it's more like Solana, Bitcoin is like the typical coins that I would hold in portfolio, I would say, because they kind of like you can still like find equities that actually invest quite a lot on those fields, I think, because most of the meme coins and the other things are based on Solana at the moment, I think, and that's kind of like the current setting. So
Yeah.
I think the like altcoin investment space might concentrate more on those kind of like platform coins that actually have some utility or something like that, to
Yeah.
basically have reason why people would buy them, not like, let's say, 3 years ago that any random coin could go up in value, because it seems to be like two-way street in the digital assets markets at the moment, because you have those coin like altcoins that don't really go up at all value with the Bitcoin, but then you have like Solana and some other major ones that are
Yeah.
more better correlated to where Bitcoin is going, I think so. And it's kind of like where the extra premium of holding altcoins in portfolio may come from, I think so.
Yeah. 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 So like everybody's waiting for an alt season, but let's see.
I think it just feels like that it's more like those people from Dubai or some other place are fighting in the Twitter and still like hoping that it happens again. But I think like if everyone waits it, then it doesn't happen. It's normally typical for equity markets as well, that it gets priced in and then it kind of like reverses when it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Bit like beginning of the year when everyone was hoping that altcoins now will rally under Trump presidency,
Yeah.
and we got like the opposite price reaction in first 3 months of the year.
So you would say it's not going to be like a self fulfilling prophecy. So you might say that yeah.
Yeah, I think the market is a way more mature.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
And like the amount of tokens has exploded.
yeah, as well. Yeah,
If you look at like Dune's chart, there's like almost like 40 million different tokens, and that every day like market is being flooded by new tokens. So
yeah, exactly. And I think it's
yeah,
also like that there's far more research available these days,
yes,
because you have CoinDesk and some other larger websites that actually publish news that most people think as reliable news, and
yeah,
that's then just leads to a situation where like the lesser coins probably don't get so much, let's say, coverage as they used to get, like when people just read their news from Reddit website or something else.
yeah. And it used to be different before, like in because like was 17, we had just like a certain amount of altcoins, and the amount has been going up, and before I think like tide would uplift all the boats, but nowadays like you have maybe like too many boats here to
Yeah,
for it to
it
happen.
feels it feels a bit like probably the IT tech bubbles, if we go back to more like equity markets, history of equity markets, I think, because in 2000 you had like that any company that mentioned like internet in their prospectus got like a lot of investors. So it's a bit like the AI or data centers 1 year ago, for instance.
Yeah, I
And
think like
then yeah,
in the alt season, altcoin hype of early 21 during spring, I remember that Dogecoin went like 1,000% within like 24 hours. There's like
Yeah, actually.
this huge
And
like Dogecoin hype back then, but I
yeah,
guess
it
that
doesn't really feel like that anymore, I think so. It's
yeah,
more like
yeah,
focused on those, because it's also like more like, let's say, institutional flow in crypto markets these days, because you have far more like market makers in the field. So probably
yes,
that also eliminates part of the less valuable assets don't get so much, let's say, capital as they used to.
yeah. As I said, market is now more mature and smart money probably prefers.
Yeah, it's also like a lot of hedge funds in recent years, and still like a lot of hedge fund type companies hire a lot of people to build like systematic trading and
Yes,
crypto assets, and then I guess like the coins has become far better valued as well, because people these days also have like some sort of variables that should price them, like the fundamentals of the blockchain itself,
yeah,
and that's kind of like probably leads also like better valuations than, let's say, 3 4 years ago when people were just following the technical indicators. Of course,
yes,
there's like still a lot of people who just believe that only technicals only matter for Bitcoin, for instance, but it's
yeah,
kind of like people's own opinion, of course.
yeah, yeah, correct. Yeah. And then I want to talk about like Bitcoin treasuries. Now we're seeing so many companies adopting sailors strategy. Recently we had this K33 Norwegian company introducing this Bitcoin treasury program, and they're buying 10 Bitcoins, and we have seen many more companies like Metaplanet before. Of course, like MSTR has been around for many years since 2020, and yeah, how do you see this like playing out, Juhani? This new thing, is this like good for the market, and at this time
Mm,
it's good as long as the spot price is positive and going
yeah,
up.
as long as price continues to increase,
Yeah,
because then those stocks also go up, right?
yeah,
Because they are basically just levered plays on Bitcoin. Yeah, just kind of, so it's kind of like supports the demand for sure. Because if they continue buying when the market goes up, then it's kind of like okay-ish for people holding Bitcoin, right? But it also like probably makes the market more vulnerable as well, because
yeah,
then we basically have a lot of players who are extremely, let's say, levered. So you could like compare it to like some hedge funds or banks in 2008 when they were super levered, and if they have to, let's say, realize their losses or gains, then that might increase the volatility of the market as well. So the downturns might become more extreme.
yeah. Yeah, I think it might increase volatility to to upside and downside both.
Especially in those coins that are part of the treasury book, like in this case Bitcoin, right? Then it basically makes part of the players extremely vulnerable for price moves.
Yeah, but for like the K33 company, I think it's okay to buy if you buy like 10 Bitcoins or like relatively small amount. I think even if Bitcoin would drop a bit, like 30-40%, they will be okay. But it depends, like
Yeah, it
if you
depends like
use
lever.
leverage
Yeah,
and what kind of structure.
yeah,
What
like if they basically would take a lot of bonds to pay buy the Bitcoin, then that probably would make it extremely levered. Like I think like MSTR is like the mm, end of the line where you find extreme leverage and Bitcoin holdings.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But
Because like
but yeah, but
yeah,
it kind of like depends. It might also just like if you had only like small amount of stuff in the and treasury, it might just stabilize against, let's say, currency fluctuations, or like especially if this case was Norwegian company, right, where
yeah,
you would have a currency that varies a lot with oil, but in this case it probably would reduce the relationship to oil, for instance.
yeah. We actually had like another Norwegian company before. It was in 21 when this Aker, it's like one of
Yeah,
these.
it's oil company, yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They bought like 2,000 Bitcoin or something like that, but they only bought a bunch then, and they haven't been like accumulating since. But they still are holding. So that's pretty early. It was in 21. So
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
one of
Aker is pretty large company. Yes, there's like 2 or 3 stocks that are separated from the original company. Actually, I think.
yeah, it is Aker City. So they were pretty early, and I guess like one of the first ones in Nordics. So yeah, but like 10 BTC for K33s, that's like 1 million USD around. So even if Bitcoin would drop a bit, I think they'll be okay. But then if you're like MSTR, Metaplanet, if you're like levered a lot, then it might be a different story. So can it?
Yeah, actually, it's kind of like it's just like the risks that people take if they buy MSTR or Metaplanet equities, I think, because then you just are really extremely exposed if something negative happens. But of course, if you manage the risks, then it's kind of like, okay, I think, because it's kind of like swing trading Bitcoin, right, or crypto assets if you hold MSTR.
Yeah.
Yeah, like because in April it almost went like 50-60%, right? It's kind of like the same thing if you own like Solo Treasuries from Canada, and then it moves like 120% from the bottom when Solana moves 20%, right?
Yeah.
Like then you would have like 5 times the leverage of the underlying asset.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like just matter of taste and how long you actually keep it in your portfolio, I think. Like if you give it a couple of weeks, then it's not so bad, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Correct. Let's move forward. So okay, this the 21 Capital. That's another one. Following a Sailor's playbook, and they have like
Okay.
what, 31,000 bitcoins. That's a lot more, but yeah. And yeah, MSTR has been buying. So as I'm usually saying that MSTR is kind of like this leading indicator to Bitcoin. So as long as they're buying, like spot price should go up, and they
Yeah,
are
actually, it's a little bit
probably
slowing down, right? Like the recent months, at least, in this data set.
yeah, but like previous like negative years that they haven't been buying that much. But let's see how will it um, move from here. But yeah, like 22 they weren't buying that much. But yeah,
Yeah, actually, when they should have, right? That's kind of like
yeah, like
the
yes, kind of yeah. But they're usually like pro cyclical also when spot is going up.
Yeah, it's kind of like just increase the risk more, I think so. And
Yeah,
now if it's like slowing down, then it's like a little bit that perhaps people should just take care of the risk management, I think,
yeah,
because I think there's like more downside now than let's say 6 months ago.
yeah. You're right that like in late 22 they could have bought one Bitcoin for like 16K. So I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Good opportunity, but they didn't. So for some reason,
Yeah, actually.
risk management
Yeah.
or like that. So who knows?
I think it's pro-cyclical, like you mentioned. So
Yeah,
I guess it's also like function of how they get like issue the bonds as well. So if there's more appetite during the stock market rallies, that's also probably one of the
yeah,
explanations, like mentioned probably before some of our calls.
yeah. But let's jump to your models. So quant models. Um, so liquidity activity. How do you see it? We're still
It's still like improving, I think so. Like, but we basically saw the bottom of the stock market and crypto markets in end of March or early April, right? Like when we started to have more liquidity, and then everything rallied strongly, and it's kind of like where we are currently are now. But there's also like the liquidity proxy is a little bit slowing down, and it's kind of like the question of how much upside there's even more for the following months. So that's
yeah,
why I would be like more careful with the asset allocation actually to probably just reduce the risk a bit and not taking extreme risks at the moment, because
yeah,
kind of like the rate of increase is not so large as let's say 3 or 4 weeks ago. Yeah, and
yeah,
but it's kind of like still like stable, so probably prices don't drop so much unless something happens in the liquidity. It just really depends what happens in the treasury markets, because that's kind of like the main driver, right? Because still like the treasury yields are increasing, and that's normally not so supportive for liquidity. And
yeah.
that's probably the explanation why we have seen slowdown again as we slow down in liquidity, because the yields are picking up again.
Yeah. Is your model like correlating with this liquidity model by round?
Yeah, it should be like pretty close actually, because here they just use they roll ahead the monthly data, because I think they use monthly mostly here, or the weekly data from balance sheet. But because my data is daily partially, so basically a little bit faster actually, and that's why the model spot the bottom faster than their model did actually.
Right.
Because it's kind of like the question of how you approximate these weekly balance sheet estimates, because they use global dollars, but I use only like bond markets and junk bonds and other assets that indicate how much extra cash there is in the system. So if like the spreads of bad bonds and good bonds narrows, then it means that these bad bond investors see like the not so good quality credit is valued higher, and that means that there's more free liquidity available, and this kind of leads to a situation where it correlates strongly actually with this one as well. I think mine is just more smoothen out because it's kind of like taking account of the seasonality of those things, and that's kind of like why it's going to be increasing. But it's kind of like interesting to see how long the increase continues, because it seems to slow down like theirs as well. Because in here we see basically this to still increase in the mid of the year, right? In this other chart as well. So I think like I don't know when they have updated recently, but I guess like somewhere in June, July should be peak in that liquidity cycle that they are showing, at least in currently chart. So we will know it in, let's say, 3-4 weeks, I guess. If we start to see a slowdown in liquidity, that would mean more bearish for the risk assets, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, let's look at on-chain activity. So this is also your chart. So
Yeah, actually,
I
like
think it's going down.
yeah,
Or
basically the Bitcoin activity is still going down, like how much income or revenue like the miners get from the extra blocks. It's slowing down, and there's like less people opening accounts. That's also like a little bit bearish, I think. So in terms of like within the on-chain, the activity is just getting weaker and indicates that there might be downside, and this kind of like looks a little bit like, let's say 22 perhaps, when we had like doubled up as well. So we will find out soon if the liquidity starts to decline, and then it start to more probably converge towards the on-chain activity. But currently we are mostly driven by the dollar liquidity, I think so. A little bit like the sentiment as well, but we see in the following slide as well. But I think like the fundamentals itself looks bearish for crypto assets, and that should be like in the medium term. If there's any like issues that happen for the market liquidity, then it might be start to again to, let's say, correct towards the, let's say, on-chain activity measure.
okay, yeah. Do you see it like pivoting upwards? So do you see it still like going down the on-chain activity, or good?
Yeah, currently it's still like going down, but I think it's mostly driven by the miners, because if you look like miner stocks, like smaller ones outside Mara, like let's say Bitfarm or perhaps Bit Digital as well, then we basically see that those don't have increased as much as, let's say, the asset managers or MSTR type of companies.
Yeah.
This kind of like shows that in the mining business there might be not so much upside as in the coins have been. So I think the downside is particularly in that kind of companies that are more like risky in that sense of how the on-chain activity results in the higher business revenue, for instance.
Yeah, makes
Yeah,
sense.
but I think the currently like the only upside is basically driven by the dollar liquidity, whereas
Yeah.
like the on-chain stuff looks not so supportive for the, let's say, the bullish case.
Yeah. But when looking at like 22, like the on-chain factor and Bitcoin spot price, like it used to correlate in 22, and then there was this like inflection point in early 23, and but now we are not seeing it correlating with
Yeah, actually, because I think that's the liquidity, because liquidity also has like started to deconverge from the on-chain activity as well, because normally you would see that the liquidity would be slower than the on-chain activity. So if we see increase in on-chain activity, then we would normally see that there's more dollars in circulation. But currently, like it's like a little bit opposite actually, that
Right.
they go their own ways. Yes.
Yeah.
But just a question of what happens in the liquidity, right? Because I think the liquidity and overall sentiment is the main thing supporting higher prices at the moment, or like steady prices, or how you want to describe this last 2 weeks?
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, agreed. And then the last one, like market sentiment. So
Yeah,
it's
it went
actually
up. It
going
went quite
well.
a lot up in April and May as well, and now it's still a little bit picking up after a drop. So it has been really like basically showing up and down a lot recent 3 weeks, and that's kind of like a little bit worrying, I would say, if the sentiment doesn't really know where it should go. It feels a bit like end of 24 last year, like when we saw like similar sawing
Yeah,
happening, and that thereafter led to like sharp increase, and thereafter this declining trend. So it might be that we are trying to find the direction as well. And if you look like last year, summer was also like a lot of showing up, let's say 10K or something like that, 10, 15K up and then down again. So
yeah,
it's gonna like probably just have to wait to see where the news go. But currently they're still like trending up slightly, so there might be like still like some upside left.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, even though in last article we had like this decline that of course led to this slight correction, but now it's again a little bit trending up.
Mm. Okay, that looks good. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess like the liquidity and the sentiment are the main driving factors why the price should go up. And if there's any decline in the market liquidity and it starts to converge towards the fundamental, let's say, activity of the blockchain itself, then we could have a correction again. But
Yeah.
we will see. I guess like we have to wait like midsummer where also like the other people see the liquidity like peaking, and then thereafter we see how it plays out.
Yeah. So a summary, like your liquidity models, it looks pretty good, but then the like on-chain factor is a bit negative, and market sentiment model looks good. So there's a bit
Yeah,
of
actually,
like
it's yeah for like
divergence.
yeah, like for next 2, 3 weeks, it's kind of like supportive still, but it depends like what happens in the news, right? Because we might have some really negative news and drop the market a lot, like if just happens something in tariff discussions, for instance,
Yeah.
or treasury
Okay.
markets. Yeah, there's kind of like the
Yes.
main two risk factors, I would say. But currently, it looks like still like supporting higher valuation for stocks and crypto. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Very interesting. Thanks for the quant models as usual, Juhani, and we can discuss again in June, I guess.
Yeah, like somewhere in end of June
Yeah.
or something like that. And then we can check how things played out.
Yeah. Awesome. And thanks for the insights. And hopefully we can see you soon again.
Yeah,
Here.
thanks a lot. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.